All right, well, why don't we get started? So my name is Andy Salo. I'm with Inocybe. Inocybe's been involved in OpenDaylight since 2013, so since the project started. This discussion is called OpenDaylight's Evolution to Commercial Grade SDN. I think it's certainly applicable to this particular summit in the spirit of the theme that Neela was discussing in its initial keynote yesterday. So what I'm going to start out by is talking about some of the challenges that are common to OpenDaylight in development and producing like a production quality build, and sort of how people are overcoming those. So first and foremost is just the size of ODL. There are quite a few components. There are, I believe it's 82 now, 82 modules or components of ODL. It started with 13 way back when. That represents, over 61,000 commits by almost 900 people and 3.6 million lines of code. So it's, certainly a sizable project. It's the largest open source networking project that's ever existed. And it's it's all or pretty much all in Java. It's some of it's well commented and some of it's not, and that presents a challenge. But it's also good to note that it is a well-established, mature code base, and so when our developers typically get into the code, and help contribute to that code, it's structured well, and so it's usually well received by development teams. And it's interesting to note that it actually represents over 1,000 years of actual code when you kind of look at it from a Kokomo model. It's quite a bit of effort that's gone in it from day one. So the other factor, other than size and just complexity is as you see here, the quality of the components. There's quite a number of components with quite a bit of code. And if you look at it from a sonar perspective and code coverage, how many people have gone to sonar.opendaylight.org and kind of checked it out? This is right from there, so you can kind of see that. You can drill down on each one of these modules and see what the code coverage is. And what this speaks to, since there's a lot of not green up there, is the need to essentially self-audit and audit the code yourself with test cases and perhaps do builds and distributions around some of these components and the right components for your use case, and then make sure that you're producing the test cases that support that use case. And so that's what our engineers do on a regular basis. And then next for that is, as far as the complexity goes, is really around then what do you integrate with for OpenDaylight? Because OpenDaylight is a fantastic project, but is often used as just a mere component of a larger scale problem or a larger scale activity that people are trying to solve. So we do quite a bit of work with integration into other projects, such of course as OpenStack, from a northbound perspective, private cloud perspective, Panda as well, which is new and coming along and has been well received from an analytics point of view. And then of course day one of this week was all dedicated to FIDO and BPP and all the initiatives that are going on there. So that's yet another integration point. And all of those basically speak to the need to have, beginning with the end in mind, right? As probably Stephen Covey would say, of the 7 habits of successful people is, start with the end in mind. And that's what you need to do to basically build around a use case. So then finally, what we kind of look at from a challenge perspective is, so what is that use case? And it usually falls into one of multiple kind of larger categories. 3 of those kind of key ones are cloud, automation, and IoT. And there's different things that you're trying to accomplish within each one of those. Within cloud or OpenStack, if it's private cloud, it's lower CapEx costs, it's improved performance, it's orchestration. Automation is a big one that doesn't necessarily have to be tied to cloud, but it could be. There's a significant amount of emerging services, but really it's mostly about agility and elasticity and being able to do things in a self-service type of way, either from an end user perspective or a network DevOps team perspective. And that results in OpEx reductions for that. And then finally is IoT, and this is some I think speaks to the framework and the flexibility of the framework for OpenDaylight and being able to do a number of things that aren't necessarily classically SDN. We've done work with a number of customers, including Avaya in this regard, with their own A architecture. And for that, there's a number of concerns in an IoT space, which includes security, providing visibility, and having the right analytics to it. So those are some of the use cases. And so then we talk about, well, how do we build a solution then for, given that landscape of OpenDaylight? And one of the things I like to say is, or talk about with different organizations is the concept of free. And what does free really mean? Because that's certainly an appeal a lot of people have for open source. But I use the analogy of there's free beer and a free as in a puppy, right? So free beer is typically well received and awesome, and everybody loves free beer. Had a few of those this week myself. But a free puppy, luckily I haven't gotten any of those this week. That entails a lot more. So puppies, there's a lot of free puppies also, but free puppies means that you're signing yourself up to a lot of work. And so I think OpenDaylight is symbolic of other open source projects where, it's more towards the puppy than the beer for sure. So it means that it needs commitment. So you need to kind of provide the care and feeding, for that environment. As I mentioned earlier, it did start with just only 13 projects. Now we're over 80, and a lot of work goes into those. And with that, to really leverage, sort of the free. I think what I'm often encouraged by, where I talk to a lot of different customers, is that if they're embracing open source from a flexibility and malleability and growth perspective, then that's the right mindset. Because now if you want to take advantage of upstream and you want to get the latest, you want to contribute to it and help make it grow and get the new things and do things in a different way, control plane versus data plane separation, that's the right frame of mind to sort of embrace OpenDaylight and frankly any open source project. But if you're simply looking at it from, okay, I got my free stuff and now I want to go use it, that's usually a recipe for disaster. And with that in mind, sometimes those projects start off a little bit on the wrong foot. Most of the POCs, proof of concepts, one of the great things about free software open source is you can just get started really easily. And unfortunately, that often has drawbacks. We like to say sometimes that things are put together with duct tape and chewing gum and whatever's available, but that often leads to situations such as this, which nobody would be happy about. Certainly, my wife. So, what that leads to is how to approach it more from a commercial grade perspective. How do you make it commercial grade from the start? How do you start off on the right foot with an open source project like OpenDaylight and do it in a way that you can accelerate the development timeline and accelerate the time to production quality? And at Inocybe, what we've done is take that exact problem statement and turn that into a way to do that, and we do that with what we call our open networking platform. And the open networking platform is a SaaS-based model, software as a service model platform for creating OpenDaylight distributions. And we do that through what is called recipes. So recipes are collections of components and how those components are going to be used. And you can see this is an example of one, which is this one happens to be around using an OVSDB node. And we have a number of those recipes. In fact, I'm just going to jump out of this presentation for a second, and I will just show you in real time since this Wi-Fi seems to be working. So this is actually what it looks like at platform.inocybe.com. You can see, by the way, this is freely accessible to anybody. You can use it for free, which is right here. You have a button to create an account. So if you want to create an account, you're welcome to do so today. But if you already have an account, then you can just log in. And once you log in, you can see, first time you log in, you're going to have to register, et cetera, and you'll have some user information there in your settings. But once you do log in, you can see all the different recipes that are available. So on that slide that I was just showing, this is how we try to start off people on the right foot and get on a path to a commercially supported, commercial grade type of distribution. Is you start with a recipe. And that recipe, we have a number of them by default that we've included, such as BGP and PCEP, virtual networks, with integrating with OpenStack, dynamic bandwidth provisioning, et cetera, right? So these are, when we work with our customers, these are the exact types of things that people want to accomplish. And so we'll start them off with a default recipe that they can use those components, and then you can look at the different kind of shorthand of what ODL components fit into that. And if you click on it, you can get a lot more information, including links to tutorials. So for this one, for example, we have our recipes posted up on GitHub, and you can just go and access that directly if you'd like. You don't even have to go through this platform, and use that to start out with that recipe. And it's got a full, Vagrant files and PDF tutorial, et cetera. So those are the types of things that you can make sure that, if you want to make sure you're using the right recipe of audited components leveraged in the right way, this is a way to do it. So let me just jump back in there here. So that's the concept of a recipe, and a recipe is built around a use case, as I mentioned. And then the second component that goes into that is streams. And so streams work in concert with a recipe. And so stream is sort of the concept of sort of like a code branch. But you will see here that we have different streams and channels within those streams that correspond to different ODL software releases. And then within each one of those software releases, there's a channel, and the channels typically are just the alpha, beta, and stable. So you can, not just, if you were doing a POC, for example, a lot of times you'd be taking raw code and you'd be putting it together and creating a distribution out of it. What we allow you to do with this is start out on whatever code branch you want, which would usually be your alpha, which would be your dev, and then you can promote that later on to your stable, as things progress, and make sure that once you get into a real production environment, you certainly don't want to be changing that code all the time. You want to work through a CI/CD process, a pipeline process to produce new incremental builds that have new features, as you would in a real commercial type software environment, and keep those new features added on a dev branch or a beta branch or what have you, and make sure your production is stable so that you can schedule upgrades of your production code like you would normally for any other type of software update. So that's what the streams enable you to do. And then we additionally added the ability to not only just take native ODL components, but add in other components or other add-ons into the ODL distribution. And so we have the concept of having code repositories, as you would, and you can either have those right within our platform or link those through GitHub. And you can use those additional code repositories to build into the recipe. So the recipe becomes not only what is maybe specific for this use case for ODL, but it's something that could include, say, additional security metrics or specialized clustering, load balancing type of support, etc. So that's where you can add that in. And what that ends up becoming is a distribution. So we like to say that a recipe plus a stream equals a distribution. And then that is where you can download those different distributions, and you could create and download those distributions based on the recipe. And the distribution becomes what we call an ODL instance. It could be a controller, it could be an agent, whatever you're trying to accomplish. If it doesn't even have to be anything related to SDN. It could be a smart city type of application where you're creating this instance that's going to be deployed on some device to control the different IoT-like components within that environment. So that's what becomes a distribution. Are there any questions on that so far? Okay. All right, now I showed a number of features in there, and then one of the things that, or several of the things that we're working on based on feedback from our customers and organizations that we work with is we do a lot of upstream work, as you might imagine. We're on the technical steering committee, we're on the board, the OpenDaylight board, and our engineers are committers to various projects. And so what we want to make sure we offer to everybody is the ability to kind of influence what they need within upstream. And so we actually just have essentially voting and are creating voting on features to manage the priority of what's going in upstream. So that's something that we offer through the platform. We're also we've been getting many requests to deploy directly as Docker images. I think I showed on that distribution download, when you create a distribution, you have a number of different package types that you can create. So you could just get a zip file, you could get a tar gzip file, you can get an RPM, and we're soon adding, within probably a couple weeks, just the ability to go straight to a Docker image for installing it for like a Kubernetes type environment. We're also adding capabilities to get better project analytics, similar to the sonar that I just showed, but kind of do it in a self-audited type of way, so within the components that we're including. And then we've got some environments where we're doing essentially co-development with our customers, and they've got in-house application developers as well. And so those developers sometimes have in place or want to have a local CI/CD environment that we can both be working from. And so we have a CI/CD proxy that we're adding to essentially enable that. So you can essentially parallel program or check, merge code and so forth. So that's what we're looking to add as well for some of those environments that need that. So those are some of the things, and of course, if you guys, we're always open to additional input on things that people are requesting, so be happy to hear any suggestions as well. So those are my main slides. I told you this was nowhere near going to be 50 minutes. That's my main set of presentation. Unless there's other questions, I'd be happy to answer those just on what people are doing today. All right, thank you very much. Thanks for coming. All right, well, why don't we get started? So my name is Andy Salo. I'm with Inocybe. Inocybe's been involved in OpenDaylight since 2013, so since the project started. This discussion is called OpenDaylight's Evolution to Commercial Grade SDN. I think it's certainly applicable to this particular summit in this. So first and foremost is just the size. of ODL. There are quite a few components. There are, I believe it's 82 now, 82 modules or components of ODL. It started with 13 way back when. That represents, over 61,000 commits by almost 900 people. A challenge, but it's also good to note that it is a well-established, mature code base, and so when our developers typically get into the code, and help contribute to that code, it's structured well, and so it's usually well received by development teams. And it's interesting to note that it actually represents 3.6 million lines of code, so it's certainly a sizable project. It's the largest open source networking project that's ever existed. And it's it's all or pretty much all in Java. It's some of it's well commented, and then some of it's not. And that presents the spirit of the theme that Neela was discussing in its initial keynote yesterday. So what I'm going to start out by is talking about some of the challenges that are common to OpenDaylight in development and producing like a production quality build, and sort of how people are overcoming those.